feels like to be in your age?
To be 91 years old, I just decided that when I got to be that old, that I was going to enjoy every day that comes, because I don't know how many more days I have. So I'm going to enjoy it now, you know. So I just do things and enjoy them.
That is really a good answer, really.
Amen.
You just make a decision like, I'm going to be happy and it's going to be a happy day.
Yes.
I know our viewers would like to know about the girl, about when Jimmie Beth, what year were you born and who were your mama and daddy?
Oh yes, I was born in 1923, June 7th, 1923, in Troop, Texas.
Troop.
And my dad was, his full name was James Edwin Adams. But everybody down there called him Jimmie. Well, just Jim. And so he was the head of the police department in Troop. And we lived down there until I was 5 years old. And my mother died when I was 5 years old. She came from a Wilkinson family. My mother was Etta, E-T-T-A, Etta Wilkinson. And her mother and dad lived in Troop. She grew up in Troop, Texas. And she had 2 sisters and one brother. Her brother's name was Everett Wilkinson. And he was living down in San Antonio most of that time. He and his wife and daughter, and that was one of the places that I loved to go, because I loved to visit them. And my Uncle Everett was the sweetest, nicest man that you could ever imagine. And his wife was too, and of course I enjoyed the daughter. And usually my younger sister Dorothy would go with us. Dorothy and I would go down there and stay about 6 weeks out of the summer. And occasionally my older sister would go with us too, Louise. And so we just thoroughly, that's a very high point in my life, was going down there in the summertime. And then the other.
So what about your siblings?
My children.
Your siblings?
Well, I was gonna say that the next place that I enjoyed being was in California. When I went out to California and I married Jones Pratt Nelson.
Just make myself out.
Yeah, I married after I graduated from high school, and then I went to business college there in Tyler. And so
what year was that?
I graduated. Let's see. I graduated from high school in 1940, and so then I got married. Well, I met this fella. He had gone to Texas Tech out in West Texas, and when he came home, he lived in Hughes Springs. It's Cass County, And when he came home for the Christmas holidays, he went hunting with his dad and his other friends. And when he did that, well, he leaned on his rifle or shotgun or whatever he had. He put it on his toe and leaned over on it while he was watching for squirrels or whatever, and it went off and shot off his big toe. So his friends had to carry him back then to the dwelling, and then when he was 17 years old, of course he had a horse of his own because they lived out there in the country, and he had a good horse. So when he was 17, he and a friend of his went downtown in Hugh Springs and were riding down through town, and they were running their horse just like 17-year-old boys probably do. And his horse slipped and fell on him and broke his leg. And so then they had to take him to Shreveport. They had to take him to Shreveport and to get that leg fixed, get it set again. But he never got over that, and he always walked get his leg set right. So anyway, when I met him, after I graduated, from Tyler High School, and I went to Federal Institute. It was a business college there in Tyler. And when I had been going there for a good little bit, several months, and one day they brought a new fella in there, which happened to be Jones Pratt Nelson. And in your typing class, there were two people that sat together, and so they set him by me. Well, about that time then, the teacher gave us a typing test. All right, ready, everybody. And so I had to take that test. Well, he was just starting that day. He didn't take the test, and he sat there and stared at me the whole time. And so then after the test, the teacher said, "Will the new students please keep typing and not pay attention to the people that are sitting by you when I give you a test?" So anyway, after I looked around at him, and he was just grinning at me. And so then that afternoon, when we got out of school, I usually had to walk home, which was about a mile from that school. And he had a little nice little car. And so he was waiting for me outside of the college. And he said, "Don't you want me to take you home? I'll be glad to take you home," is what he said. And I said, "Well, I don't know. I walk home every day." And he said, "Come on, I would be glad to take you home. I want to know where you live." So he took me home, and that was the beginning of me going with Jones Pratt Nelson. So anyway, we went to college there, and then after we both finished college, the World War II had begun at that time, he told me, he says, well, they're going to get me anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and volunteer to go get in there, and that way I will have a choice of what I can do. So therefore, he joined the Air Force.
Okay.
He joined the Air Force, and they took him in, and I was surprised because he did have his knee never did get really right, but they took him in, and he had to be in training at Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where he went for training. And then they brought him, well, they sent him to California. And so he stayed out there, he stayed out there, and then he had some time off. He had 10 days off, and so he wanted to come back to Tyler to see me. He came by train, and so he told me, he wrote me every day that he was there, wrote me a letter. And so anyway, he came in on train there in Tyler, and he called me and told me that he was there. I didn't really know he was there till after he was there. And he had gotten him a room in a little hotel downtown. And so he called me, and so he told me, he said he had gotten in that night, so he stayed there that night, but he was going on up to Hugh Springs to see his people. And so anyway, my folks told me to bring him. I told them that he was there, and they knew that. Oh, by the way, we were engaged before he left to go. That he gave me, and so they said, well, well, he could come and stay out there at our place, over at my grandmother's house, because she had an extra room. But he said, well, no, he was going on up to Hugh Springs to see his people. And so then he told, let's see, he said, would you like to get married while I'm here on leave? He said, I said, well, we're going to get married sometime, so I guess it might as well be today.
A time like the present. Huh?
Yeah. And so my mother said, she said, well, I was 19 years old, and she said, well, if you're bound and determined to get married, said, I want you to marry here in our house. And so we had a home wedding. But in the meantime, before that, well, he wanted me to go home with him and meet his people. See, I didn't really know his people. So he took me home, and we stayed up there a couple of days. And then he brought, he had a real good buddy up there. And he brought that fella back with him to be his best man. So we had a wedding then when he came back. And then after we were married, then we went to see what it's a town. I think it was Mount Pleasant, and they had a nice hotel there, so we went there and for a couple of nights, and so then
he went back to California
yeah.
and left you here?
Well, he said that he had to go back, and he said as soon as he got really straightened out, because he didn't know where they were going to move him, well, I could come out there. He'd be finding a place for us to live. So time went on, and I graduated from
business college.
College and all that, and I was working at the bank, and so finally, so let's see, had I gotten another job? No, I think that's where I was working when he came. Oh, he came home. He got 10 days off. See, and I already told you that, and we got married. So he was
finding y'all a place to live, getting things situated.
Yeah, and so I told him, well, I'd come out there on the train, and so I left. Well,
Tyler.
I had to go to another town from Tyler to get on a train. So my mother and daddy took me down
Probably
there.
Big Sandy went.
Another town fairly close there. And my mother and daddy took me there to catch the train. And so
You went all the way out to California.
all by myself.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Then was it fun? Did you enjoy the trip?
Yeah.
Did you meet some interesting people to talk to?
Oh yeah, lots of people, I never meet a stranger anyway, so. Anyway, I went on out there, and he told me that he would meet me in Sacramento. And where he was stationed was halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento.
Do you remember what the name was? It like called Fort something?
Yes, it was, let's see. Just a minute.
Oh, don't worry about it. We'll
Anyway,
think of it
what
later.
his base was up there, I can't get it right now, right at this particular minute.
It'll pop in.
Little hotel there, and it was up above a store, and so he told me that was all he could find for then, but he wanted me to come out. When I came out, we'd hunt a better place to live. So that's where we stayed up there for a day or two. Susan. And the little towns, there were two little towns that were a mile apart. Susan, S-U-I-S-U-N. And it was, so we had a room in a house with kitchen privileges. Now they were doing that, a lot of couples were doing that during the war like that. So we stayed there a while until we, let's see, we found over in Fairfield, which was a mile from Susan. Over there, we found a trailer in a trailer park that was for rent, and so we rented that trailer. And so then, so we stayed there for a while. And
what year do you think this is? It's still in the 40s?
We married what did I say, 44? Yeah, it was still that year.
Okay.
It hadn't, that,
Hadn't been a whole year since
no,
it was
I
there.
don't think so. So we stayed there, and we rented this trailer, and it wasn't bad, you know, it was a fairly nice trailer. And so we stayed there a while, and then I got me a job there in that town with the newspaper. And so then we were renting that one, and then we found a trailer that we bought. We bought it ourselves, and that was our first home. Our first home that we bought was that trailer. And so we lived in it for, I don't know how long. And then we found, Jones Pratt got real good friends with his captain out there, because they had gone to the same college, Texas Tech. And so his captain told him, said that another officer had lived in the other side of a house that had 2 apartments, and he was moving out, he was being moved, and he said he would get that other side of that apartment for us. So that's where we went.
And that's where y'all stayed the longest at.
And it was furnished, so we didn't have to buy furniture at that time. But in the meantime, Rita was born. She was born when we had that little trailer. She was born over in Fairfield. So she was, she was crawling by the time we got that apartment.
Oh, wow.
And so the war was over right there. But if the war had not been over, if it had lasted one more week, they were fixing to send him overseas. But so therefore he didn't have to go overseas. And we all got to come home.
Oh.
And I told him, I said, Jones Pratt, I said, why don't we just stay out here in California? Because I liked it out there. And I said, we've got a house here, a duplex, that we could probably buy this house if we wanted it, or something else. And I had a good job there. And I said, well, of course I had the baby, but I could go back to work for the newspaper if I wanted to. And so he told me this. He said, I wouldn't give you 1 ounce of the whole state of California. He said, I wouldn't give you 1 ounce of
Acre of Cass County.
Of Cass County for the whole state of California. So we came back to I said, well, if it means that much, well, let's go on back home. So we went, and we, of course, stopped in Tyler, and then his sister lived in Dallas, and they took us to Tyler, and then some of the family came and took us up to Hugh Springs, and we lived with his mother and daddy for about a year before we ever got our own place. Think about having any other children, but when we found a nice house, or it was a nice little house.
Did y'all buy it or rent it?
Down on the highway, and so we had a chance to buy that from one of his daddy's. Well, no, he had gotten a job out at Lone Star Steel Company. That was at that town, you know. You remember that, don't you? So he got a job out there, but he did not work for the steel company. There was another company that he was in there.
Did he work for the union? He worked for the union? Or?
It was, did you ever hit, let's see, I can't think of the name of it. It was another company in there, though. So he worked there as long as he worked.
That's where that house.
There, and when we lived in that little house, and
is that where Sally was born?
well, yeah. Let's see. We already had Rita, and then 6 years later we had Brad.
And y'all were in the house on the highway.
Yeah, we bought that house on the highway.
And is that the house you were telling us the story earlier about the 200 chickens that?
No.
That wasn't the one?
It was
a different one?
Yeah, before we bought that house, we had just rented another pretty good sized house, and we did live in there for a little while. But, so
about that.
When we moved on down to the one on the highway, Brad was born, and 2 years later Sally was born down there. And so, and we had an acre of land around that little house there. And so,
now I'm going to skip forward in time and ask you quickly about your daughter Rita, son Brad, and other daughter Sally. Can you tell me about their children? They went on to have children, right? And what their names are?
Oh, their children.
Well, did Rita have children?
Oh, yeah, she has. She had 2, and she married Phil Chambly.
They had 2
and
girls or 2 boys.
They were living up in St. Louis.
Oh wow!
When her oldest child, which is Rodney, when he was born up there in St. Louis, and no, he was not. Let me take that back. They had moved Phil to where were we talking about it's down on the coast here.
Oh, Corpus Christi.
They moved to Corpus Christi and stayed about, I don't know, his company moved him down there. And when she had her first baby, Rodney, well, I went down there and stayed with her a week then. And,
then they had another kid?
And then not then, but
they went on to have one later on in the future.
Later,
what was
Eric?
Eric was his name.
Yeah, Eric. You don't know Eric? Moved around several different places, and they lived in Houston for a long time. And then after they both retired, they moved to
Georgetown.
Moved to that.
There's the door that y'all gotta get out of. I'm ready to go as soon as they walk by in front of me. Okay.
They moved to.
It's not. We're ready to go at any time. They come in and say it's time to go. It's time. We'll stop. Okay.
They moved to Georgetown.
Okay. So you had your second child is Brad. Now, what's his whole name?
His name is Jones Bradley Nelson.
Did he have any children?
He had the same. His daddy wanted him to have the same initials that I had.
Oh.
And so I said, well, I want him to have your name. That was when he was born. And so that's why.
Where'd y'all come up with the name Brad? Was that somebody in the family?
Jones Bradley.
Yeah.
Just the short for Bradley.
But there wasn't a Brad in anybody's family he was named
Well,
after?
Dr. Bradley was the dentist there at that time. And he was married to
And y'all just thought that was a good name, like the name Brad?
to a cousin of Brad, of Brad's mother.
Oh, okay.
And so I just thought that would be a pretty good name, and Jones Brad said, well, that sounded good to him. So we settled on that. And now Rita's full name is Marita, Marietta, Marita Elizabeth. So Jones Pratt wanted her named after me. And so my name is Jimmie Elizabeth. And I was Jimmie Elizabeth Adams. And just to kind of cut it short, well, everybody just says Jimmie Beth. So Jonathan, what is his middle name now?
Paul.
Jonathan Paul Nelson. And how much older are they of you than
18 months difference.
Yeah. And then they had you, Christopher, and what's your middle name?
Brady.
Brady.
Like Brad, but with a Y.
Well, that's pretty. So each time.
So they had So Granny, who do you got here beside you?
Oh, I've got my great-granddaughter. Her name is Faith Nelson.
She's got an interesting look. What is she? Is she the daughter of Jonathan or Rodney?
She is the daughter of my grandson Christopher.
Oh, well, she is a beautiful girl.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for joining us today with a talk with Jimmie Beth. Stay tuned or tune in next week when we'll talk with Jimmie Beth again.
Well, thank you. So, I'll talk with you again.
What did she end up having?
Well, she only has one, and that's Matthew.
Oh, Matthew. Okay, and his name's Matthew McCord. Okay. Well, so that's those are your grandchildren.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got to that point.
And Matthew's married, you know. And they have the one child, daughter.
What's her name?
Let's see, what is her name? Oh gosh, why can't I think of it? It's not Cloella, but something like that. Something like that. Starts with C.
I'm gonna get.
Now I had, let's see. I've had two first cousins, double first cousins, and my aunt and uncle that lived there in Longview, and he was chief of police there, and their son, we called him Sonny, but he was just Junior, and he has disappeared. We don't know where he is, or he left Longview to go to Maine. He had a job up there. Well, he cannot be found. And Brad has tried to help me locate him, but he's my double first cousin. His mother married her husband's brothers married sisters, in other words, there. So we're trying to find him, and then I've got another cousin that's disappeared.
Well, we got Ava. I want to thank you for talking with us today. Give you a big hug and a kiss.
Well, I think that's mighty good.
And we want to thank you for watching part 1 of the interview with Jimmie Beth Adams Nelson Goolsby.
That's right.
And we hope you tune in to see part 2 and part 3 of more interviews to come. Thank you.
Oh, are you gonna run that thing?
Oh yeah, we're going to have more of these. And that way